Hi, fellow artists. Welcome to today's video. I've got my puppy, Ellie, here. You guys have seen Ellie before here on my channel. She is about 6 months old now, so you guys have kind of seen her grow up a little bit. And what she's here to help me with today is we're going to talk about a very, very simple but very common kind of issue that a lot of us deal with when we're painting. And that is shaky hands, okay? This is something I see a lot of beginners struggle with this, but also not just beginners, also intermediate, advanced, and even professional painters and painters like myself. Like, this is something that even you guys struggle with all the time. So it's very common. If you do struggle with this, you're definitely not alone. And what do you think? So Ellie and I here are going to share some very simple but very useful tips with you today. So aside from just the basic, like, try not to drink coffee or caffeine before you start painting. The obvious things that would maybe help with your shaky hand, and you're like, well, I've already tried that and it doesn't help. These are additional tips that you probably haven't already thought of. So, tip number one we have is think about the way you physically hold your hand while you're painting. I know, you guys, simple thing, but again, you might not have thought of different ways to do this. So when you are physically painting, whether you're right-handed or left-handed, I always say and kind of recommend that you go the opposite direction generally as you're painting versus whether you're right or left-handed. So if you're right-handed, like I paint right-handed, so typically when I'm doing a painting, I really like to, if at all possible, go from left to right, like on my canvas or in whatever plane surface I'm painting on. And of course, if you're left-handed, it would just be the opposite. Just try your best to go from right to left. I know not always possible. Sometimes, especially if you're taking a guided class, like I teach guided classes all the time here. Like I teach guided classes here on YouTube, and then also over on my Campus Academy platform. When you're following along with the class, sometimes even in the class, we don't always go from one direction to the other. Sometimes we go from the middle out or from the outside in. But when you're painting on your own, it is just a little bit of a simple tip to go from one direction to the other, because say if you're right-handed and you're going from left to right, that's going to eliminate, you're not going to brush your hand accidentally through an area of paint that's already wet. Whereas if you were, again, right-handed and you went from right to left, then you might end up accidentally brushing your hand, especially if you do kind of have a bit of a shaky hand, accidentally brushing it through, smearing paint that is already wet that you already did on the right side of the page. Along with this, another way you can focus on the way you move and hold your hand is try to rest your wrist and your arm on something, just on something, right? So if you're someone who likes to paint on an easel, I never really have painted on an easel, I'm just saying. I always like to paint on a flat surface, on a flat table, a flat counter, just whatever, just something flat that I can physically rest my hand, well, my wrist and my arm on, so that then I have more control. My arm is more relaxed, and I'm not, this is where things literally come down to like anatomy and physiology, right? You're not tensing the muscles in your arm or in your wrist then, so that you can paint with a little bit more control in your hand. You're not tensing your whole entire arm up, or again, if you're doing things left-handed. Now, tip number 2, try to use the smallest brush possible, because unless you're filling in like a background or a really big space that's just all one color or something, when you're trying to do really fine, small details, it helps to have a really fine tipped brush. And what I mean by a fine tipped brush, sometimes it's not even the size of the brush. I mean, you want to go for a generally smaller brush, but you want to go for a brush that comes to a really fine, tiny, almost minuscule point on the very end. So I'm talking about round head brushes here, of course, not the flat ones, not the flat head, but a round head brush that comes to a very small point on the end. The brush itself can be a little bit larger. It doesn't have to be the exact, like the smallest brush that they have in the art supply aisle, because sometimes those tiny things are like, you can't even get any paint on them, right? But just any brushes that you have, make sure they come to a really fine tipped point. And a way to make sure that your brush is always coming to a fine point, and I teach this in a lot of my classes as well, so if you've already taken classes with me, you've probably heard this one before. But one way to make sure it comes to a really fine point and that it keeps coming to that fine point time and time again, because again, the more we use the brush, the more the bristles are going to want to splay out, is dip it in your water cup, and then you want to kind of roll it on like a napkin or a towel or whatever you're using to clean your brush with. You want to roll it a time or two and just keep rolling it over itself so that then the end does come to that really, really fine point. And again, how does this relate to having, you know, a little bit of a shaky grip? Well, think it's a lot easier to control a very, very tiny small tip than it is a large one, especially if you're doing like outlining on a painting or something. Or again, those really, really tiny fine details where you really want to get things really close, like precision in there. Then having a tiny, tiny small tip on a generally pretty small brush is going to be the best option for you. Okay, tip number 3. This is one that you probably, I'm very likely have not thought of. I'm thinking it's very likely you have not thought of this one before. One thing you can do if you do have a really, really shaky hand and you find it difficult, especially to outline things, like I know I teach a lot of classes where we outline something at the very end, especially when, like in my premium Disney inspired painting course, where we do a lot of like cartoonish type of portraits, but then we do outline them with black at the very end. And if you have a really, really shaky hand, it can be really hard to do like a fine, thin line as your outline. And again, we're working with black a lot of times when we're outlining. So one thing you can always do, and it's totally not cheating you guys, is swap out your paintbrush for a marker. Because with a marker, you're going to have a lot more, again, control, because it's probably going to come to a really, really solid fine tip that's not going to move or wiggle around on you while your hand might be, you know, wiggling itself a little bit. So again, it comes back to that control part of it. It's also a lot faster to outline things with a marker because then you don't have to, you know, keep going back and dipping into more paint. So that one's kind of a win-win-win all around. However, and I'm going to make this the next tip then, tip number 4, is practice, practice, practice with making those really, really thin lines over and over again before you actually go to do them on an actual large-scale painting, like a painting that you're trying to complete. So have like a practice page set aside if you need to, especially if it's a day that your hand is feeling extra wobbly. Just give yourself some time, some space, just take a deep breath, and go on ahead and practice making really, really thin lines over and over again on that separate piece of paper before you actually do them in full on your full painting. And again, if you're someone who you're like, well, I really do want to at least try to do the outlining, you know, those thin black lines myself in the painting, and I don't really want to use a marker unless I absolutely have to, then just go on ahead and practice with the paint first, you guys, and then see if it's not working out completely for you, then you can go on ahead and swap in for the marker. Our next tip is tip number 5. Now this one I guarantee, not completely guarantee, but I very, like 99% guarantee that you have not thought of this one before. Okay, you want to go play, go play. And it comes back to, again, like I said, you guys, anatomy, physiology, there are muscles in your arm, in your wrist, and in your hands, and we don't really realize that, you know, in order for our fingers to do this, there has to be muscles in our hands, right? It's physically impossible to move any part of your body without muscles being involved. And just like athletes like to train their muscles, and you know, not even just athletes, just in general, the more we train a muscle, the stronger it's going to be, and the easier it's going to get to use that muscle in the future. So one thing that I very highly recommend, and I actually do this myself, is to do hand exercises. And these can be actually really, really simple, because the stronger your hand is, the less likely it is going to, you know, shake and move around on you while you're painting. Even if it still does shake, the shakiness might not go completely away, but the stronger you get your hand and your grip to be, it might come down a little bit, and it's going to make it a little bit easier for you to control. At least a little bit, I guarantee. Well, again, don't completely guarantee, but 99% of the time, you guys, the more you work it and the more you use it, the stronger it's going to get. And I actually noticed that I started doing this because I actually do a lot of cake decorating on the side. And so once I started really getting into cake decorating, I found that my hands would really cramp up after I was done, especially cupcakes piping. I would pipe like 50 cupcakes at a time, and my hands would really cramp up afterward, and I would have to like ice, especially in my wrists. It was always like my hands, my grip, and especially in my wrists, and it would really hurt, and I didn't understand why until I realized that holding a piping bag and squeezing a piping bag, especially so many times, and consistently applying pressure to the bag is actually really using your muscles, your hand muscles, your wrist muscles, and the grip in your hands. So then I started coming up with little simple exercises that I can do to kind of make that a little bit easier and to strengthen my grip then for when I do, have to do those large orders and pipe so many cupcakes at a time, so that then now my hands don't hurt nearly as much as they did when I first started. And you can do this. They do sell, I have seen them at Five Below, just saying. They have like grip trainers that like are a thing you squeeze to really strengthen your grip. But you guys, you can use anything you find around the house. Anything with squeezing, anything with the motion, the action of squeezing is really gonna help you. Like what I do is I take these kitchen tongs that I have, and they're really tight. They're really hard to squeeze. So at least a couple times a week, if I'm just in the kitchen or something, I'll just get them out of the drawer and I will just squeeze them a good like 30 reps or something at a time with each hand too. Of course, you can do this with your more dominant hand, the one you paint with more, to really strengthen that up. But it does help to kind of even things out. I'm someone that if I do something like with one hand, I gotta do it with the other hand to even it back out, or else I just feel lopsided. So trying hand strengthening exercises, you guys, is a really good idea. Something you probably haven't thought of before, that will probably help you at least tone down the shakiness just a little bit. Now I think our last and final tip from Miss Ellie today. Oh, look at that, y'all. You're so cute. You're so adorable. Our last and final tip is to just be patient with yourself, right? Be patient with your hands. Remember that your hands are kind of a gift in themselves, right? There's so many things that we can do with our hands, and so we really kind of need to, I don't want to say, but I guess treat our hands with respect and really be patient with yourself, because I know it can be really frustrating when your hands don't want to cooperate with you. But really take things slow. Remember that there's no rush when it comes to painting. You can take as many days or weeks as you need, take as many breaks in between, take a day break, take an hour break, take a few minutes of a break, whatever you need, so that you can always come back and finish that painting later. And just, of course, be super duper patient with yourself. That's probably the most important thing of all. So I believe that is all the tips we have for you guys today. What do you think, Miss Elle? What do you think? Isn't she such a cutie, you guys? She's like almost 15 pounds and she's only 6 months old, so I think she's gonna be at least 30 pounds by a year. But she is so much bigger than the last time we saw her on camera, so I wanted to bring her in and incorporate her in the video today. So like I said before, you guys, if you're really interested in learning more tips and tricks, make sure you follow me here, subscribe. You can also leave a comment if you come up with other, tips to add to this video that I didn't already say, or if you find something really helps you, let me know. And of course, as always, be sure to check out my Canvas Academy painting platform if you are interested in learning more in-depth how to paint, painting classes, painting courses, all the things. I know you guys will absolutely love it, and I love teaching you guys over there. So until next time, my little Elle is getting a little sleepy. Say peace out. Later, our fellow painters and home dogs. You're so cute.